Hey guys, how are we doing? Back another video from Annie News, and we've got another cut content video on DanMachi, episode 3. I'm really enjoying season 2 of DanMachi. I've watched everything. I'm completely up to date at the moment. Loved it. It's been a while since I've found an anime that, you know, has got like 12 episodes, and I've just gone boom, all of it, and really enjoyed it. Sword Art Online was hard. I mean, there are others, but I'm having to wait on my girlfriend to catch up, so Dr. Stone and that. But DanMachi season 2, if you're not getting into it, you need to. It's really good. But let's find out what they changed, or at least cut out, shall we?
The thing about the DanMachi anime is that, for the sake of plot progression, the anime sacrifices a lot of the lore and world building, which is actually pretty understandable considering the pace that they're going at. But it's also just as interesting to learn more about the gods, the people of Gekkai, and the world that they've built together. And with this episode of cut content, you'll get to see a bit of all of that. Episode 3, Conversion.
Conversion, self-twilight version. I don't know why it's toxicity.
And with the war game having been confirmed,
the
news of it spread like wildfire.
Yes.
Everyone in the guild was fully occupied prepping to meet the specifications for it. Though they didn't know what was going to happen yet, it was their responsibility to find a way to.
It is so fast-paced as well, this anime, this season. I love it. There's always something going on.
A danger to the citizens of Arario, all while still meeting the demands set by the gods. The war game could start at any moment, and the guild needed to be able to provide a stage for it. So they eventually settled on the ruins of an abandoned castle located to the southeast of Arario. This was known as the Shreem Castle. It belonged to a series of castles that served as the mainland of defense to the dungeon.
Oh.
These castles were built long before the Tower of Babel was established to serve as the light of the dungeon.
Why do we
Their
like
purpose
that?
was to stop the advance of any monsters that would emerge from the dungeon's gaping hole. After the Tower of Babel was built, the castles fell to ruins after many centuries of neglect.
Oh.
I mean, they served no purpose anymore,
Didn't
so they
need
were
them.
sort of just left alone.
Huh.
Well, all of them except for the Shreem Castle. This one was used as a staging point by the Kingdom of Rakia and the war that occurred almost 1,000 years ago.
Oh.
It was also built rather sturdy, with the walls and many other defenses still remaining intact to this day. That's why it was chosen as the stage for the war game. Whatever preparations were needed for it were handled by Aina and Misha, one of which was to clear it out, since a group of robbers had moved into the castle.
Oh, right, that's kind of cool.
The guild had to hire the Ganesha familia to forcibly remove them. While Aina was handling the paperwork for this, Misha could clearly sense Aina's worry and anxiety. To Aina, Belle was like a little brother.
Yeah,
and
she cares.
He was caught in this war. She wanted nothing more than to help him any way she could. But the guild restricts its employees from interfering with interfamilial affairs.
Oh,
This made her feel completely useless. It did bring her a bit of comfort, though, when Misha told her that her support would be more than enough to satisfy Belle. Meanwhile, the gods were busy holding a Donatus to decide what exactly was going to happen. If you recall, the Donatus was a meeting of the gods held once every 3 months on the 30th floor of Babel Tower.
Right.
Normally, this meeting was used to discuss a myriad of things, but most often than not, it was used to give aliases to adventurers that had recently ranked up. Of course, the big topic for today was how the war game was going to be fought.
Yes.
Many of the gods
What type of
were
war
neither
game
on
is it?
Hestia nor Apollo's side, and as such, they simply wanted to watch a fair yet amusing fight. Having Apollo's entire familia gang up on Belle wouldn't be the most riveting form of entertainment,
boring.
especially for something like a war game that doesn't happen too often. So this led to the suggestion of having every god in attendance write down an idea, then have a single one be drawn at random. As we know, the result was Castle Siege, an event so disadvantageous to Hestia that Hermes suggested allowing outside help.
Yes,
now,
but you can have
Apollo
one.
wasn't just going to give up his advantage like that. If he let outside parties help, then Hestia could likely pull some pretty powerful allies that could easily back Apollo.
She could. Look at all that.
And Apollo knew this. He adamantly denied
So you can have one person who's
at
outside of
least
the
Freya swayed the general opinion. Now, this wasn't the only time that Freya had defended Belle. Back in Season 1, during the Donatus to pick Belle's adventurer name, Loki was accusing Hestia of hiding the secret behind Belle's abnormal growth. Of course, she couldn't just tell them about his Liaris Freeze ability. That would make him far too coveted amongst the other gods.
Yeah.
This backed Hestia into a corner, and that's when Freya came to the rescue. She de-escalated
she likes
the
Belle.
situation
She wants
by
to see how he can
rationalizing
progress.
Belle's sudden growth with the high-level Minotaur that he had just slain. Now, the very fact that Freya had just spoken out in defense of another familia's child was enough of a red flag to garner Loki's attention.
Yeah, it's like, why?
This was quite unusual behavior for Freya. And although Hestia wasn't able to pick up on it, Loki knew all too well that something was up. So she put aside her little feud and briefly warned Hestia to watch out for Freya. Hestia kept this warning in the back of her mind, but never really gave it too much thought afterward. At least not until Freya defended Belle again here.
And then it's like,
Seeing
wait,
Freya
what's
randomly
going on?
for no reason whatsoever immediately set off all the alarm bells.
Bang, bang, bang.
But this was no place to voice them. If Freya's actions made even the slightest difference to her and Belle's predicament,
oh my God, that
then
was so
she
good.
had no choice but to
Invaded
accept
that
them
place.
with open
You're showing
arms.
clips from episodes later on.
With the gods now favoring Hermes' suggestion due to Freya's intervention, Apollo had no choice but to give in, leading to the finalized rules of the war game. Switching over to Lily now, she was being held in the Soma familia's wine cellar, a location separate to their actual home because there simply wasn't enough space for them to store all their wine. And given that this wine was their most valuable asset, this place was guarded far more heavily. Lily was being treated as a prisoner, kept in a place that was initially designed to
He's not a nice man.
who violated the rules or got too drunk. Metallic wires bound her body, and all she could do was squirm around on the floor. Part of her expected that this was going to be the way things turned out, but she couldn't help but remember that only a few days ago, everything was so happy and special. Now, the reason Xanis had devised this extensive plan just to recapture Lily was so that they could use her transformation magic to make more money. They would use Lily as a lure to bait out monsters, then capture them and sell them for profit. This confused Lily, though, because she knew the absurdity of trying to tame a wild monster.
Yeah, like...
Sure, they could be tamed, but it's a known fact that they will only ever listen to their tamers. And even if tamed, that wild monster would still use any and every opportunity to attack any human that wasn't its tamer. It's just in their nature. That's why tamed monsters often have no value. Or so at least Lily thought anyway. Xanis seemed to know something else. But before he could get into what that something else was, the alarm bells began to ring.
Ding, ding,
Xanis
ding.
left the room, giving Lily a chance to escape from her bindings. She saw no need to stay in her cell anymore since Xanis wasn't going to keep his promise.
Oh, bless.
And she definitely didn't want to become his puppet. So as she used her magic to loosen the bindings around her wrist, the guard Chandra simply got up and opened the cell for her. His reason being that he too was unhappy as one of Xanis' puppets. His whole reason for coming to Mario was to taste the finest wine around.
But in the anime gives her the key.
Soma's familia, no amount of wine could make up for the way that Xanis uses him. Naturally, he didn't care anymore for the orders Xanis gave him, so he just let Lily go. Now, being restrained by metallic wire for 3 days had taken a toll on her body.
Of course.
She struggled just to get to the ground floor, after which she found a window and
then she sees them fighting outside.
to find everyone fighting what seemed to be an endless onslaught of Soma familia members.
Cool.
Hestia also just so happened to be near that very window, and when she saw Lily, she told her how much they needed her. This was a first for Lily.
Bless.
No one had ever needed her before.
I am needed.
She'd always just been abused or taken advantage of. She didn't even think that she was worth saving, let alone be someone who could support in something as important as a war game. Yet,
yeah, but Belle needs you.
Those words resonated with her. Something within began to overwhelm her. Emotions she had never felt before made their way to the surface. Then, as if possessed, she started to run as fast as she could towards the only person she knew could stop the fight, her god. Meanwhile, Xanis was watching the battle unfold from the roof. To him, the fight seemed unlosable. He was already planning what he would do once he captured the goddess that was with them. Perhaps he could strike another deal with Apollo. That thought was cut short though when he spotted Lily out of the corner of his eye, after which he left his lookout point to go intercept her before she could reach Soma. When he crashed through the window and appeared in front of Lily, she found herself weak at the knees, frightened by this abusive bully who had just made his entrance. Still, she carried on, turning her back and running towards where she thought Soma could be. It didn't take long for Xanis to catch up, though, and he kicked her into the wall. Now, although Xanis was only level 2, he had more than enough strength to overwhelm Lily. But rather than simply taking her back into captivity, he decided to toy with her for a bit, letting her gain distance before catching up again and striking her off her feet once more. Whether it was a punch or a kick, one strike was more than enough to knock Lily in any direction. Xanis found enjoyment in this little game of cat and mouse, but mostly it was to break her down by making her see that all her efforts were for nothing. Even so, she continued forward, using all the energy she had left to get herself back up and to keep moving. Xanis' final kick sent her straight into Soma's private chamber. Although he was in the room, he paid no mind to the child that had just crashed through his door. In fact, he would have continued to do so if not for Xanis. You see, one of the few people Soma acknowledges is Xanis, and Xanis told Soma that Lily had something she wanted to tell him. Not because he wanted to help her, but because he already knew how the conversation was going to end.
Yeah.
And he couldn't wait to see Lily's face when all her requests get dismissed as if they were nothing. So, with this opportunity, Lily got on her knees and began to beg. But when she looked up into her god's eyes, she saw nothing but disappointment. You see, what the anime didn't explain so well was the real reason why Soma became so disinterested in his familia. Lily only came to realize this when she saw Soma's empty gaze. She saw he was disappointed by his followers, disappointed by the world of Gekkai. Originally, Soma had used his wine as a reward for his children's services, but rather than thank him, they instead turned on each other, fighting amongst themselves in order to get more. Seeing his so-called followers degrade to such a primitive state led to his resulting detachment from them. He no longer had any interest in followers that would succumb so easy to his wine. Their words became irrelevant. That's why Xanis was one of the few people he listened to. He was able to resist the seductive effects of Soma's wine, whereas Lily was known to have lost herself in the past to it. That's why she needed to be tested. With a cup of divine wine placed in front of her, Lily had to overcome the very thing that ruined her life in the past in order to preserve her new life now. If she couldn't, then the path before her would lead her right back to the one that she's always been on. And she would have succumbed to the effects of the divine wine if not for remembering the warmth of Belle's smile. This gave her back some sense of self, allowing her to muster out a few words. Soma looked back in shock, his eyes filled with interest, finally showing something other than disappointment. It was as if seeing one of his children change before his very eyes made something spur within him as well. He was speechless. The only thing he could do now was Lily's request. So he took an empty barrel of wine and threw it into the courtyard, bringing a halt to all the fighting. Now, out of frustration, Xanis was about to cut down Lily, but as we saw, Welf was able to intervene.
Hell yes.
In the novel, their fight was a bit more evenly matched, since Xanis was actually pretty skilled with his rapier.
Yeah.
But Welf had great strength and better movements, eventually beating Xanis through sheer power.
Cool.
With Xanis taken out, Chandra comes in and puts him in handcuffs.
Oh right, that's cool. I like that.
Stealing Soma's wine and selling it to make his own profit.
We should have seen that. That would have been
to
cool.
threaten anyone who would find out about his shady dealings. Hestia came in shortly after, and as reparation for pretty much invading Soma's property, she offers him Belle's Hestia knife as payment. It was pretty much collateral for until after the war game. If they lose, then he can keep the Hestia knife. But if they win, then she'll use her reward money to buy it back. So, seeing that the knife was in fact a Hephaestus creation, Soma accepts the deal. This included Lily's transfer to the Hestia familia, a ritual completed through the process known as conversion. One that essentially erases all markings indicating the contract with Soma, and rewriting it with ones for Hestia. Now, Lily wasn't the only one to join the Hestia familia after this raid. Everyone who was there wanted to assist Hestia in the war game, but they just weren't sure how to. Miak couldn't give up his only child, since if Nazo was to leave, then his familia would be automatically disbanded and revoked by the guild.
Right.
Inevitably leading to a complete loss of whatever reputation and recognition he had. Now, the reason why she couldn't just leave then come back is because once a familia conversion takes place, that child can't switch to another familia for a whole another year.
Oh, right, okay.
The contract between a god and a human has to last at least that long before being changed again. That's why Welf and Mikoto's commitment required such a great amount of determination to make. Takuma Kazuchi had no idea how to approach Mikoto on the subject. I mean, he wanted to help Hestia by giving her a familia member, but Oka was the leader, and everyone other than Mikoto was too weak. She really was the only reasonable
She's
choice.
class.
But Take had no idea whether she would be willing to switch familias or not. So it came as a shock when Mikoto took the initiative upon herself.
And she asked herself,
Take was ashamed that he had been with Mikoto for so long, yet failed to anticipate how she would react in this situation. Still, though, he was proud of the child that he had raised. Hephaestus encountered a similar situation. She was in her office, admiring a dagger made by a problem child with unpolished skills. Yet there was a passion behind this child's work that made her see some great potential. As she was thinking of this, Welf entered the room to demand his transfer to the Hestia familia. It wasn't a request for permission, but rather a demonstration of will and determination. Reason being that leaving Hephaestus essentially puts his blacksmithing at a handicap, since he wouldn't be able to use her logo on any of his creations.
Oh, right, okay.
He was pretty much willingly diminishing himself as a high smith. Hephaestus could tell that Welf didn't care though. She knew that if it was for his friends that this child would do anything. So, before leaving, Hephaestus gives Welf one of her hammers as a parting gift,
Cool.
then bestows upon him the soul of a smith. Finally, we
That's
have
cool.
Freya.
Why did they miss
She was
that
a bit
out? That's
hesitant at
important.
first because she was worried about her identity being revealed. This because the actions of a certain hooded adventurer in the past had landed her on the guild's blacklist. Only after Hermes convinced
Hermes
her
is
to
like,
protect
come
her
on,
identity
please.
did she decide to join the war game. So, with the players and location now set, we can finally switch over to Belle, who had been training from sunrise to sunset for the past 5 days. Eating and sleeping were the only breaks that they took. They didn't even return to their homes, but instead slept right there on the wall. The duration and intensity of their session had increased significantly since the last time they trained together.
That's cool.
And the improvements to his reaction speed was a testament to his hard work. While Tiona would occasionally jump into spars, she also helped out by retrieving food, water, and various items.
Alright, so they could just keep going.
Belle and Eyes could set
That's
their
incredible.
focus completely on the training at hand. Tiona also brought back information regarding the war game. It was to be held in 4 days, giving Belle really only 2 more days of training left. So he continued his training on into the night, constantly getting beat down, but at the same time soaking up the knowledge that Tiona and Eyes shared. With the war game drawing near, the excitement for it was building up, and the whole city couldn't wait to see the events unfold. One goddess in particular was keeping close watch on everything that was happening. She sat at the top of the Tower of Babel.
She's so cool. She is, like, proper cool.
Could break her focus. She was enjoying every second as she watched these 3 different brightly lit souls glow as they clashed with each other on the city walls. She felt no pity for the boy who kept getting beat down over and over again. Reason being that every time he got back up,
he was stronger.
His soul would shine brighter and brighter.
Cool.
As if it was
Okay,
being put
she
through
could
a
see that,
forge
can't
that was
she? Yeah.
eliminating all his impurities. These girls were drawing out Belle's full potential, bringing out that fully transparent glow that originally drew Freya towards him, a glow that would interest her until the end of time. Now, if it wasn't for her own curiosity in seeing how things would end up, Freya would have done what she did to Ishtar to Apollo. And let's be honest, it definitely would have been just as easy. So
cool, she just slaps her off the stairs. It's like, ah! I loved it. I was like, whoa. She's so...
None of his children were around as they were all preparing for the castle siege. It's here that we learn that Apollo could have easily stolen Belle while he did his initial assault. Well, that's what he thought anyway.
He thought he could,
that if
right.
Apollo was that direct about it, then Freya definitely would have stepped in. But it was probably the idea of the war game itself that likely appealed to both gods. Apollo saw a clear difference between a conflict fought in the streets versus one that was fought in a war game. There was much more glory from a victory in a set stage with rules. If Apollo played it fair, then nobody would question the means that he used to obtain the end. That end, of course, being Belle. With the war game, he could lawfully obtain Belle through the conversion process, as well as provide entertainment not only for himself, but for so many of the gods who were dying for some. He was shaking in anticipation, more than ready to indulge himself in his newest passion once the war game was over. His intense desire for Belle was like a drug, but the only thing that he could do now was rely on his children and count down the minutes. So that's pretty much the build-up to the actual war game. Next episode we'll get into the war game itself. But until then, expect another lore video and some other content from different anime.
Cool.
Now,
that was cool. A lot of cut stuff. Different things, little interesting things. I would have liked to have seen that guy get handcuffed after being such a bad man. And, yeah. It's cool. I mean, I can understand why some of the stuff's cool. Like, you didn't need to see that, like, they've been training non-stop and one of them's constantly going to get water and food. The pacing, I do like how the anime is just constantly like this. Or every episode, something is happening, and I love it. Absolutely love it. And I do believe, just before filming this, is seeing that Season 3 and an OVA is confirmed for DanMachi, so it's continuing. Awesome. Not waiting as long as we did between the first season and the second season. And that was an interesting video. Thank you guys very much for watching. What did you guys think of that? What do you guys think of this? Click like, subscribe if you haven't already. Leave comments down below. Let me know what I should watch and discuss in future videos. And I'll see you guys. Next time.